Mets spring training is underway. Three things that you need to know after the first week. Welcome to the Empire State Sports Report, where we talk everything New York Giants, New York Yankees, and New York Mets. I'm Adrianna, your host. Today's going to be a mini episode strictly about the Mets, where we are talking about three things that you need to know in the first week of spring training. So if you're a Yankees fan tuning in, this name will sound very familiar to you. So we're going to start off with talking about Clay Holmes, because he has been moved back to the starting role since signing with the Mets, which I think the Yankees should have done about halfway through the season last year, and maybe they could have prevented Clay Holmes from getting into double-digit blown saves and ruining his confidence. But I'm not Aaron Boone, so I don't make those decisions. But he has done a really nice job so far in his few starts with the Mets. He is having a great start to the season. And I think that, look, we talked about this before, but confidence is really important. And when you're someone like Clay Holmes, who's coming off a really tough season and who's known in New York for being the guy who's blown a bunch of saves, to be able to start off spring training and feel like you've got some sort of momentum and you've got your confidence back is really, really important. And I'm happy for Clay Holmes. I feel like he was just put in a bad situation with the Yankees, and I feel like they didn't do him any service. They didn't help him at all by leaving him in there time after time to fail. So I'm glad that the Mets moved him back to the starting role. I think that's 100% where he needs to be. And I know spring training is early and it's all about practice and getting comfortable and, getting back into the swing of things. But I just really think that it says a lot that in the first few starts for Clay Holmes, he's done quite well. So I'm excited for him. And I hope that he continues that on in spring training. So I look to hear more good news about Clay Holmes. Let's talk about injuries when it comes to the Mets, because just like the Yankees, they are suffering. But I have a solution for them, which we will talk about after the third thing. Frankie Montas has a high-grade lat strain. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, but he is not the only pitcher on the Mets dealing with an injury, because Sean Manaea has a right oblique strain and will be out until April. So now you've got two of your starting pitchers that were in the rotation that are going to miss opening day and then some. So obviously there's no set timeline on that, but it's looking like both of them are going to be at least into the start of April, potentially even mid-April. So the question now is, how is the rotation going to fare without both of them, right? It's one thing to lose one, and then you've got spring training to try to build up some of the guys in the pen and see how that goes. But I think, there's probably some concern there if you are Carlos Mendoza. So the other thing to note is that Konai Senga has dealt with some injury issues in the past. So the question with him is going to be, can he stay healthy? And now you've got another guy in your rotation that potentially has dealt with injuries when you have two starting pitchers that are injured. So I think for the Mets, the biggest question this year is going to be, how does their rotation fare? And, this is going to be a big test for them. So look out for the Mets to see if they bring someone else in. I'll tell you who I think they should bring in just a minute. But as we talk about the pitching rotation, we have to talk about Max Kranick, who is having a good spring so far as well. So, again, spring training, really important to help these guys work out and get them in the swing of things. But I think that having a guy like Max, having a guy like Senga, like these are the guys that you're going to have to rely on more than you probably originally thought you would, especially now as they work to figure out what they're going to do with their rotation dealing with these injuries. So here is my solution for the Mets, and it's a win-win for the Mets and the Yankees. Best of both worlds, right? Trade for Marcus Stroman, okay? He's not going to be a starting pitcher for the Yankees, and he wants to be a starting pitcher, and he's capable of being that. He just doesn't fit in the Yankees rotation. But he could come into the Mets and he could start day one, and it would be a win-win for them. They've got a solid rotation guy. He doesn't really get injured that much. You know that you can probably get a good 5 innings out of him. And, he's a bit more of a reliable pitcher. And the fact that, if you have Senga, someone that has a bit of an injury history, but you can bring in someone like Stroman who doesn't have that, hello, it's a win-win. And you also have Steve Cohen, who doesn't give a crap about money. So he can gladly take on the $18 million that is Stroman's contract this year, and potentially has an extension for 2026. Why would you not do it? And I think, we know that Marcus Stroman is quite vocal and things like that. So I also think he would be really on board with that because he's got a lot of family in New York. He doesn't have to leave. He can go play with three former players, Montas, Soto, of course, and Clay Holmes. So he's got other guys that he knows on the team. He's going to a team that Juan Soto claims gives him the best chance to win a World Series, and he's going to be a starter, which is what he really, really wants. And he doesn't have to leave New York. I just think that this should have been done yesterday. And I really think that the Mets need to get on the horn. And listen, if I'm Cashman, I'm calling up Mendoza and say, listen, I got an idea for you and Cohen. Let's talk about it. So I think it's a great idea for everyone involved. I think it's a must do. It solves problems on both sides. And it's just, there's no reason not to do it, right? So those are the three things you need to know. Obviously, the fourth is my little pitch on Marcus Stroman. And the last thing that we can touch on briefly is Juan Soto is Juan Soto. And I think, if you're a Mets fan, obviously there's a lot of excitement about Juan Soto. And I think if you're concerned about the bullpen, listen, you bring in Stroman. And if you're a Mets fan, you have to feel pretty good about that, right? You've got a good starting pitcher. You've got Clay Holmes, who looks good so far. You've got Juan Soto. And then you brought back Pete Alonso. Like the Mets, I know there was a lot of concern that they only brought in Juan Soto, which they kind of did, but they did bring in a couple other guys that are going to help the pitching rotation. We're supposed to help the pitching rotation, right, before they got injured. But you're bringing back Alonso. You got Lindor, Alvarez. Like, I just think that they could be in a really good place if they add Stroman to the mix. So why not? That's what I got for you on this mini episode. Let me know if you guys like these. I figured throughout spring training, we'll keep them short and sweet. I think a lot of fans are not really fully invested yet, and that's cool. As soon as opening day starts, though, we're going to have a lot more to discuss. So we'll go back to weekly episodes once opening day starts. I will keep them separate, Yankees and Mets. And, if we need to, they'll be a little bit longer than 7 or 8 minutes. But I will be back next week with more Giants updates because, my God, you guys, we have a lot to discuss. So that's going to be a little bit longer than this one, but it'll be a fun one. So make sure you subscribe, share with your friends, enjoy the rest of Mets spring training until I talk to you again.